When my daughter-in-law told me I had to leave, I smiled instead of crying. It wasn't a happy smile, you understand. It was the kind that comes when you finally see the truth you've been hiding from clear as day. It was a smile of surrender. I just nodded, my lips pressed together, my eyes probably looking old and tired. I turned and walked quietly to the room they called mine, the little box room at the back of their bright modern house. And as I packed my few things into the same suitcase I'd arrived with 5 years before, my heart wasn't breaking. It was just quiet. The storm had already passed. I'd heard it coming. I'd heard her on the phone just a week earlier, her voice a sharp, hushed whisper from behind the closed kitchen door. I know, she'd said. But what can we do? She's just a burden now. Those words, they hung in the air of this home I'd tried so hard to make my own. They changed everything. Subscribe to my channel if this video hits you. If a story about family and the quiet spaces between words means something to you, please like this video, add a comment, and share it with your friends. Your support helps these real-life stories find their way to those who need to hear them. Now let me take you back. Let me tell you how I got to that kitchen door and to that suitcase. My name is Evelyn. For most of my life I was just a mom, a wife. My world was my husband Robert and our son Ben. Robert was my anchor, my laughter, my best friend for 42 wonderful years. We built a simple, happy life together in a small house filled with books, the smell of home-cooked meals, and so much love. Ben was our miracle, our only child. We poured everything into him. I remember his small hand in mine, the earnest questions, the scraped knees I'd kiss better. He grew into a smart, driven man, and we were so proud. He moved to the city for university, then for a good job in tech. That's where he met Sarah. Sarah was beautiful, sharp, and ambitious. She came from a different world than ours, one of business meetings and sleek apartments. When Ben brought her home, I saw the way he looked at her like she hung the moon. I wanted to love her for him, and I tried, I really did. After Robert passed, the house felt like an echo. The silence was so loud it hurt my ears. Ben and Sarah would visit on weekends, but the gaps between their visits felt longer and longer. I could hear the worry in Ben's voice during our calls. "You're all alone there, Mum," he'd say. "This big house is too much for you." He wasn't wrong. My arthritis made the stairs a mountain. The garden Robert loved was becoming a wilderness. One Sunday, over a lunch I'd spent all morning preparing, Sarah put down her fork and looked at me, her expression soft with what looked like concern. "Evelyn," she said, "we've been talking, we have the spare room, it's just sitting there. Why don't you come live with us? We can look after you, it would be so much easier." Ben's face lit up. "Yes, Mum, it's perfect, you wouldn't be alone. We could have dinners together every night." The idea wrapped around my lonely heart like a warm blanket. To not be alone, to be near my son, to maybe build a bridge to Sarah, to be part of a family again. I saw it as a new chapter, a gentle closing of my old book and the start of something shared. I sold our home, gave most of the furniture away, and packed my memories into albums and that one trusty suitcase. I arrived at their stylish townhouse with hope fluttering in my chest, like a small, fragile bird. The first year was an adjustment. I called it my room, but it was really a glorified storage space that fit a single bed and a small dresser. The window looked out onto a brick wall, but I told myself it was cozy. I tried to make myself useful. I'd wake up early to make breakfast, just like I did for Ben when he was a boy. I'd have scrambled eggs and toast waiting, but Sarah preferred a green smoothie, gulped down while checking her phone. Ben would eat my food, but quickly, always glancing at the clock. "Thanks, Mum, you shouldn't have," he'd say, giving me a peck on the cheek before rushing out. I took over all the cooking and cleaning. It was my way of contributing, of earning my keep. I'd spend hours in their beautiful stainless steel kitchen, which never felt as warm as my old one, preparing dinners. I'd wait for them to come home, the food kept warm in the oven. More often than not, a text would come, "Working late, don't wait up," or "Meeting clients for dinner." I'd eat alone at their large, cold dining table, the clink of my fork the only sound. I tried to bridge the gap with Sarah. I'd compliment her on her work, ask about her day. Her answers were polite but short, a closed door. She'd talk about things I didn't understand, market shares, networking events, brands I'd never heard of. I'd just nod and smile. I started to feel like a piece of furniture, one that was sometimes in the way. If I left a knitting project on the sofa, she'd tidy it away without a word. If I watched my programs on the television, she'd hover, remote in hand, wanting to put on the news. The house was theirs, their rules, their rhythm, their life. I was a guest who had overstayed, only I lived there. Ben was caught in the middle, I could see it. When I'd suggest we all go for a walk on a Sunday, he'd look at Sarah first. If she sighed or said she had work, he'd say, "Maybe next week, Mum." His kindness felt heavy with apology. The vibrant son I remembered was becoming a man who was always slightly tense, always trying to balance two worlds that were drifting further apart. And I began to shrink. I spoke less. I stayed in my room more, listening to the sounds of their life from behind my closed door, their laughter, their conversations, the life I was on the outside of. The hope I'd carried in my heart that first day began to feel very, very small. The small tensions were like drops of water on a stone. Slowly, quietly, they began to wear things down. It wasn't one big argument. It was 100 little moments that made the air in the house feel thinner, harder to breathe. It started with the cooking. Sarah began buying these meal kits, boxes with precise, tiny portions of ingredients and instructions. "It's more efficient, Evelyn," she explained one evening, placing the colourful packets on the counter. "No waste, and the nutritional information is calculated." My hearty stews and casseroles, made with a pinch of this and a handful of that, were suddenly messy, old-fashioned. One night I made a shepherd's pie, Ben's favourite since he was a boy. I used his dad's recipe with a cheesy, crispy top. Sarah looked at her plate, moved the food around with her fork. "It's a bit heavy, isn't it?" she said lightly. "All that starch and dairy." Ben ate it, but he didn't have seconds. The next week the meal kits appeared regularly. My role in the kitchen shifted from cook to helper. I was to chop the pre-measured vegetables, but only as the card instructed. I felt my hands, which had fed a family for decades, become clumsy. Then there were the sounds of the house. I've always been a quiet person, but my quietness began to feel like a problem. The floorboards in the hallway creaked. I tried to remember which ones to avoid when I'd get up for a glass of water at night. One morning, Sarah mentioned it offhandedly to Ben. "Your mum was up and down last night. The creaking woke me up." She wasn't scolding. It was just a statement. But Ben looked at me with gentle eyes and said, "Maybe try to keep it down at night, Mum. Sarah has a big presentation today." I wanted to say I just needed the bathroom. I wanted to say the house made noises too, but I just nodded. "Of course, dear, I'm sorry." I started keeping a glass of water by my bed so I wouldn't have to leave the room. The worst was the silence at dinner on the rare nights they were both home. The clinking of cutlery was so loud, I'd try to start a conversation. "I saw the most beautiful roses in the park today," I'd say. Sarah would nod. "MMM." Ben would ask, "Which park, Mum?" trying to help. But the thread would always snap. They'd talk to each other about people I didn't know, about plans for holidays to places I'd never see. I'd sit there, a spectator to their life. I felt myself becoming invisible. My opinions, my stories, my very presence seemed to fade into the background, like wallpaper they'd grown tired of. I tried harder. For Ben's birthday, I spent weeks knitting him a sweater. Robert had always loved the ones I made. My fingers ached, but I pushed through, thinking of the warmth it would bring him. When I presented it to him, his face did that complicated thing it always did now, a flash of genuine pleasure, quickly covered by a look of concern. He held the soft, cable-knit fabric. "Mum, this is incredible. You shouldn't have gone to all that trouble." Sarah touched the sleeve. "It's very handmade, Evelyn, but where would he wear it? The office is business casual, and our weekends are so busy." The sweater ended up folded on a shelf in his wardrobe. I saw it once when I was putting away laundry. It looked sad, tucked between his sleek suits. It never left the dark. My world became very small. It was my room, the kitchen during the day when they were gone, and the living room for an hour in the evening if I was careful. I missed my old home with a physical ache. I missed the light through my own kitchen window. I missed the noise of my own life. Here I was trying so hard to be no noise at all. I started taking long walks just to be out of the house. I'd sit on a bench in the park and watch families, watch the birds, watch anything that felt alive and uncomplicated. I'd return feeling both better and worse, refreshed by the outside air, but heavy with the knowledge that I was returning to a place where I had to make myself small. Ben tried in his way. He'd pop his head into my room. "Everything okay, Mum?" He'd bring me a cup of tea sometimes, but our talks were surface level. "How was your walk?" "Fine, dear. The weather's turning." "Yes, it is." The deep, easy talks we used to have were gone. A wall had grown up between us and I didn't know how to climb it. He was busy building a life and I was becoming a piece of its furniture that was slightly in the way. I could feel his love, but it was tangled up with worry, with guilt, with a sense of duty. It didn't feel like the free, joyful love between a mother and son anymore. It felt like a responsibility, and that is a cold, hard feeling to live with. One Thursday evening the turning point began, though I didn't know it then. Sarah had a friend over for coffee, Chloe, a woman with a loud laugh and sharp eyes. They were in the kitchen and I was in the living room pretending to read a magazine. The door was open. I couldn't help but hear. They were talking about a mutual friend's mother who had moved into a fantastic assisted living community. She has her own little apartment, Chloe said. There's activities, people her own age, nurses on call, she's thriving, and honestly it gave her daughter her life back, no more constant worry. There was a pause, then Sarah's voice, lower, thoughtful. That does sound ideal, it's so hard balancing everything. You want to do the right thing but it's a lot, the constant adjustment. I felt my face grow hot. The magazine pages blurred in front of me. I wasn't meant to hear this, it was just a conversation between friends. But the word burden wasn't spoken yet. It hung in the air, unspoken, waiting. I got up as quietly as I could and went to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to my own heart beat. That was the first crack. The first real sign that my presence here was not a blessing, but a problem to be solved. The crack from that conversation didn't heal, it just got longer. I found myself watching Sarah more, listening to the tone of her voice when she spoke to me. It was polite, always polite, but it had the warmth of a stone you find in the shade. A week after her friend's visit, I noticed brochures on the recycling pile, bright, glossy pages showing smiling silver-haired people playing board games in sunny lounges. Maple Grove Senior Living. Harmony Hills Community. I didn't touch them. I just saw them there, nestled between an empty cereal box and a junk mail envelope. It felt like a secret I wasn't supposed to know. My hands shook a little as I made tea that morning. The kettle seemed louder than ever. I decided in my foolish, hopeful heart that I needed to try harder, to be less of a problem. I stopped offering to cook altogether. I cleaned more thoroughly, trying to make the house spotless. I stayed in my room almost all the time, only venturing out when I knew they weren't home. I became a ghost in their house. I thought if I was quiet enough, small enough, tidy enough, the idea in those brochures would go away. I thought I could make myself indispensable through invisibility. Ben noticed my retreat. One Saturday he knocked softly on my door. I was sitting in my chair by the window, just looking at the brick wall. "Mum," he said, coming in, "you've been very quiet lately. Are you feeling all right?" He looked tired. There were new lines around his eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. "I'm perfectly fine, dear," I said, giving him my best, breeziest smile. "Just giving you your space. You're a young couple, you need it." He sat on the edge of my bed. "You don't have to hide away in here, you know. This is your home too." But the way he said it, it didn't sound like a conviction. It sounded like something he was supposed to say. I reached out and patted his hand. "I know, love, I'm happy. Don't you worry about me." He looked down at our hands, his young and strong, mine veined and knotted with arthritis. He didn't look convinced. He just squeezed my fingers and said, "Okay, as long as you're happy." When he left, the room felt emptier than before. We were both pretending and we both knew it. The phone call happened on a Tuesday afternoon. It was raining, a soft grey drizzle that blurred the brick wall outside my window into a smear of dark red. I had come out to make myself a cup of tea. The house was silent. Sarah was working from home that day, shut in the study with the door closed. As I waited for the kettle to boil, I heard the low murmur of her voice. She must have been on a break on her personal phone. The kitchen door was almost shut, but not quite. Her voice drifted out, clear and unguarded, thinking she was alone. "I just don't know how much longer I can do this, Mum," she was saying. There was a long pause as she listened, then a sigh heavy with frustration. "No, Ben won't hear of it. He feels too guilty. But it's not just the extra work, it's the emotional energy. Everything has to be considered. We can't just spontaneously go away for the weekend. We have to think about meals, about her routine. The house is never truly ours anymore." My blood went cold. I stood frozen by the kettle, my hand halfway to the tea caddy. Her voice dropped, becoming more confidential, more sharp. "I know she tries, but that's almost worse. The constant, quiet hovering, the look on her face when we make plans, it's like a cloud, Mum, a grey cloud in every room." Another pause. My heart was hammering so hard I thought she might hear it. Then came the words that changed the temperature of my entire world. I know," she said, her tone shifting to one of cold, practical finality. "But what can we do? She's just a burden now. She's just a burden now." The kettle clicked off, the boiling sound dying into a quiet hiss. The words didn't feel like a sound. They felt like a physical thing, a weight that settled on my shoulders, pushing me down into the shiny tile floor. A burden, not a person, not a mother, not Evelyn. A burden, something to be carried with resentment until it could be set down. I didn't make the tea. I walked back to my room, my steps steady and silent. I didn't cry. I just sat down in my chair and looked at my hands in my lap. All the little moments, the meal kits, the creaking floorboards, the folded sweater, the brochures, came together in a single, clear picture. I had been fooling myself. This was never my home. I was a tenant in their life and the lease was up. The love I thought was here, the family I thought I was part of, it was a mirage. The reality was in those 7 words. The strange thing was the calm, a deep, terrible calm. The hope was finally gone, the pretending was over, the stone had broken, and in its place was a hollow, quiet understanding. I knew what came next, I just didn't know when. For the next week I lived in that calm. I was polite, I smiled, I was the perfect quiet ghost. I watched them. I saw the way Sarah would sometimes look at me, a flicker of impatience in her eyes before she smoothed it over with a tight smile. I saw the way Ben's shoulders were always slightly hunched, as if carrying that weight she had named. I saw the life they were living around me, a life I was no longer part of, not really. I was a shadow in the corner of it. Then on Sunday evening it happened. We had just finished a quiet dinner, one of Sarah's meal kits, a rice bowl with precisely 8 prawns each. Ben was clearing the plates. Sarah wiped the already clean counter. The silence was thick, and then she spoke. She didn't look at me, she looked at Ben. Ben, we need to talk about the living situation. Ben stopped, a plate in his hand. What about it? I kept my eyes on the table, tracing the grain of the wood with my finger. It's not working, Sarah said, her voice firm but calm. For anyone. I think it would be best if Evelyn found somewhere else to live, somewhere more suitable, with people her own age, with proper support. The room was so quiet, Ben looked stricken. Sarah, we talked about this is her home. Look at her, Ben, Sarah said, and finally she turned her gaze to me. It wasn't cruel, it was just factual. Is she happy? Are you happy? We're all just existing. It's not fair on her and it's not fair on us. There are good places, we've seen the brochures, she'd have independence, we could visit. Ben looked at me, his eyes full of a pain I never wanted to see. Mum, he started, his voice breaking. That's when I smiled. I looked up at my daughter-in-law, the woman who saw me as a grey cloud, a burden to be managed, and I smiled a small, sad smile of surrender, of release. It's all right, Ben, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. My heart wasn't hammering anymore, it was still. Sarah's right. My smile seemed to shock them more than tears or shouting ever could. Ben's face crumpled. Mum, no, you don't have to, we can figure this out. It's already figured out, dear, I said, my voice still that strange, calm river. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping softly on the floor. I'll start packing tonight. I didn't wait for an answer. I walked out of the kitchen, down the hall and into my little room. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for just a moment, taking a deep, shuddering breath. The calm held. It was the calm of a decision made, of a path finally seen clearly, even if it led into a forest. I heard their voices then, hushed and urgent through the wall. Ben's low and anguished. How could you say that, just like that? Sarah's, defensive but firm. It had to be said, Ben, you saw her, she agrees, this is for the best. I didn't listen anymore. I opened my wardrobe and took out my suitcase. It was still under the bed where it had been waiting for 5 years. I began to pack. It didn't take long, I hadn't accumulated much. Some clothes, a few photographs in frames, Robert and me on our wedding day, Ben as a gap-toothed 7-year-old, a family shot from a long-ago Christmas. I wrapped them carefully in my sweaters, my knitting basket, my well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. That was my life in one suitcase and a tote bag. As I folded the last cardigan, there was a soft knock at the door. Mum, it was Ben. He sounded like a little boy again. Come in. He opened the door and stood there, filling the small space. His eyes were red. He looked at the open suitcase on the bed and his face fell further. You don't have to leave right now. Tonight. This is too fast. I sat on the edge of the bed. Where should I sit, Ben? I asked gently. He looked confused. What? In your house. Where should I sit so I'm not in the way? Which chair is mine? I asked it not with anger but with a genuine curiosity. Which shelf in the fridge is for my things? When you and Sarah laugh in the living room and I'm in here, am I meant to come out and join you, or am I meant to stay quiet so I don't interrupt? He opened his mouth but no sound came out. He had no answer. I heard her, Ben, I said, my voice soft. Last week, on the phone, she said I was a burden. The word hung in the small room, ugly and final. He flinched as if I'd struck him. She didn't mean it like that. She's just stressed, Mum, with work, with everything. But she said it, I replied. And the terrible thing is she's not wrong. I held up a hand to stop his protest. Listen to me, I came here to be part of your family, but a family isn't a duty, it isn't a problem to be solved. I feel like a guest who forgot to leave, and you, my beautiful boy, you look at me with love, but underneath it I see the worry, I see the weight. I never wanted to be a weight on you. Tears spilled down his cheeks then. He sank to his knees on the floor beside the bed like he used to when he was small, asking for a story. He put his head in his hands. I'm so sorry, Mum, I'm so sorry. I wanted this to work. I wanted to take care of you. I reached out and stroked his hair just like I used to. I know you did, my love, and you have, but taking care of someone, it shouldn't mean making yourself and your wife unhappy. It shouldn't mean your mother feels she has to become a ghost in her own home. He looked up, his face wet. Where will you go? That was the question, wasn't it? The big, frightening unknown. I don't know yet, I admitted. But I have some money from the house. I'll find a small place, a little flat maybe, something that's mine. A flat, alone. The panic in his voice was real. Mum, you can't live alone. I lived alone for 2 years after your father died, I reminded him gently. I managed, I will manage again, differently, but I will. Then let me help you find somewhere, he pleaded, grabbing my hand. A nice place, somewhere good, please don't just disappear, let me do this. I saw in his eyes that this was his chance to help, to love me in a way that didn't break his marriage, to lift the burden by helping me carry it to a new door. It wasn't the solution I'd dreamed of 5 years ago, but it was real. It was honest. Okay, I whispered. Okay, Ben, you can help me. He cried then, great, shaking sobs of relief and grief all mixed together. I held him, this grown man, my son, as he cried on my knee. We cried together for the dream that hadn't worked, and for the painful, truthful new beginning that was coming. For the first time in years we weren't pretending. The wall between us was gone, blown apart by the terrible, truthful words, she's just a burden. In its rubble we found each other again. Not as caregiver and burden, but as mother and son, facing a hard thing together. Later that night Sarah came to the door. She didn't come in. She stood in the hallway, her arms crossed. She looked at the packed suitcase, then at me. Evelyn, she began, her voice formal, I want you to know this isn't personal. I looked at her, this woman my son loved. I saw not a villain, but a woman who was also in a difficult spot, who wanted her life and her marriage back. I didn't forgive the words, not yet, but I understood the feeling behind them. I know, I said simply. She nodded, a quick, sharp movement. We'll help you financially, of course, with whatever you need. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. She turned to leave, then paused. I never meant for you to hear that, she said, so quietly I almost missed it. I know, I said again, but I did. She left and I was alone with my suitcase and the quiet hum of the house at night. The storm was over, the landscape was changed forever, but the air was clear. The next 2 weeks were a strange, in-between time. I lived in their house, but the pretense was gone. It was like waiting at a train station after your ticket has been punched. You're just waiting for the journey to start. Ben threw himself into finding me a place. He'd come home from work with printouts and iPad screens full of listings. We'd sit at the kitchen table in the evenings, after Sarah had gone to work in the study, and look at them together. This one has a lift, he'd say, pointing, and look, a little balcony. It says vibrant social scene, I'd murmur. I'm not sure my vibrancy is what they're looking for. He'd smile a little then, a real smile, the first in a long time. Your vibrancy is exactly what they need, Mum. We looked at a few of those assisted living communities. The ones from the brochures, they were nice, clean, bright, friendly, but they felt like very nice hotels, not homes. Everyone was so similar. Same age, same stage. I walked through a common room where a group was doing gentle chair aerobics, and I thought, I'm not ready for this. Not yet. It felt like another kind of box, just a prettier one. One afternoon Ben found a different listing, a small ground-floor flat in a quiet block not far from a park. It was in an older building, nothing fancy. The walls were painted a warm cream, not sterile white. The kitchen was small, but it had a window that looked out onto a shared garden with a few struggling rose bushes. The living room had a bay window. It needs some work, Ben said, worried. The carpet is old. The bathroom is tiny. I walked over to the bay window and looked out. I saw a tree, a proper green tree with birds in it, not a brick wall. My heart gave a small, quiet leap. This one, I said. Ben helped me with everything. We bought a new soft carpet in a warm grey. We painted the walls myself. Well, he did the high parts, I did the low parts, and we both got paint in our hair and laughed. We found a second-hand armchair that was just the right firmness and a small, sturdy table for two. I bought a new kettle, a blue one. It was mine. We hung my photographs on the walls. Robert smiled from above the fireplace. Gap-toothed Ben watched over the kitchen. It was small, but every inch of it was mine. I wasn't a guest, I wasn't a burden, I was just Evelyn in her flat. Moving day was bittersweet. Ben loaded my suitcase and a few new boxes into his car. Sarah was out, a work commitment, she said. I think it was easier for everyone. I stood in the doorway of my little room for the last time, now just an empty box waiting to become a gym or an office. I felt no anger, just a quiet farewell to a chapter that had closed. Ben drove me to the flat. He carried my boxes in, fussing over where to put them. He set up my television, programmed my new phone, stocked my fridge with enough food for a week. He fluttered around like a mother bird. Finally, there was nothing left to do. He stood in the middle of my little living room looking lost. You'll call me if you need anything at all, day or night. I will, I promised. I'll come by tomorrow, check on you. I'd like that. He hugged me then, a long, tight hug. I love you, Mum. I love you too, Ben, more than you know. And then he was gone, the door clicked shut, the silence settled, but it was a different silence than the one in his house. This one was mine, I could fill it or leave it empty. It was my choice. I walked to my blue kettle and made a cup of tea. I took it to my armchair by the bay window, sat down and watched the tree. A sparrow landed on a branch, shook its feathers. I sipped my tea. And for the first time in 5 years I felt at peace. The first few weeks were a learning curve. I had to be responsible for everything again. Bills, shopping, cleaning. My arthritis made some things hard, but I learned to pace myself. A little bit each day. I joined a small library 2 streets over. I started going to the park every morning just to walk and feel the air. I began to recognize faces, an older man who walked his terrier, a young mother with twins, a lady who fed the pigeons. We'd nod, sometimes say good morning. It was a start. Ben visited every other day at first, then settled into a pattern of every Sunday for lunch. And those Sundays, they were different. He'd come in and the tension was gone from his shoulders. He'd look around my little flat, see the new plant I'd bought, the book I was reading on the table. He'd ask, "How are you really?" And I could tell him the truth, that I was lonely sometimes, that I was proud of myself for managing the hoovering, that I'd had a nice chat with the librarian. He'd tell me about his work, about his life. Really tell me, not the sanitized version for a fragile mother, but the real stuff, the project that was stressful, the argument he and Sarah had about holiday plans, the funny thing his colleague said. We talked. Properly. For the first time since I'd moved in with him, we were 2 adults having a conversation. The love was no longer a heavy, guilty thing. It was light, it could breathe. Sarah came with him once a month after I'd moved. She brought a potted orchid. It was a peace offering. We had a stiff, polite lunch, but it was a start. She saw me in my own space, competent and calm. She saw Ben relaxed and smiling. I think she saw that her burden was now a person again, living a life. It changed something. She didn't become a daughter to me, but the Cold War was over. We had found a new border and we were both respecting it. One Sunday, Ben was helping me put up a new shelf. He was holding it steady while I marked the wall with a pencil. He said out of the blue, "I'm sorry I didn't see it, Mum, how unhappy you were, how squeezed you felt." I finished my mark and looked at him. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," I said. "I was so busy trying not to be a problem I became a bigger one. We were both trying to protect each other's feelings, and in doing so we lost the truth." He nodded, his eyes shining. "I miss having you in the house," he said, "but I don't miss the feeling that I was failing you every day." "You never failed me, Ben," I said, my voice firm. "You gave me a soft place to land when I was lost, and then when it was time you helped me learn to stand on my own again. That's not failure, that's love." He put the shelf down and hugged me, right there in the middle of my living room, with the drill and the rawl plugs scattered on the floor. We held on to each other, not in sadness, but in a quiet celebration of a hard truth faced, and a different, stronger love found on the other side. My life now is small and simple. It has its quiet days, but it is mine. I have my routines, my walks, my library books, my Sunday lunches with my son. I am not a burden, I am Evelyn. A woman who loves her son, misses her husband, enjoys a cup of tea by the window and is slowly making a new life from the pieces of the old one. The grief for the dream of a multi-generational home full of noise and shared meals, that grief is still there, a soft ache. But it's not the whole story anymore. The story now is about dignity. It's about honesty. It's about the love that remains when the pretending stops. So here I am, sitting in my armchair, the evening light softening the room. The orchid Sarah brought is on the windowsill, and it has a new bud, a small green promise. My shelf is up, a little crooked if you look closely, but it holds my favorite books. The quiet in this room is a companion now, not an enemy. I think about that word often. Burden, it's an ugly word. It sounds heavy and hopeless. For a long time after I heard it, I believed it was true. I let it define me. I saw myself through Sarah's eyes, an obstacle, a complication, a drain on a young couple's vibrant life. But time and a little distance have given me a different sight. I wasn't a burden, not really. I was a person in a difficult situation, we all were. We were three people who loved each other but in different languages, and we were trying to live in a house that was too small for all our unspoken expectations. Ben's language was duty and guilt. Sarah's was efficiency and space. Mine was gratitude and a desperate desire to belong. We were speaking past each other every single day. The real burden wasn't me. The real burden was the silence. The things we didn't say, my fear of being a nuisance, Ben's fear of not being a good son, Sarah's fear of losing the life she'd planned. We carried those fears around until our backs ached, and we called it love, we called it family. But love shouldn't break your back. Family shouldn't be a sentence you serve. Leaving was the hardest and kindest thing I've ever done for myself and for my son. It broke the spell. It forced us to stop the pretense and see each other clearly. It allowed Ben to love me as a son, not a caregiver. It allowed me to love him as a mother, not a patient. Our relationship had to change shape to survive, and in changing it became stronger, more truthful. I don't have a big, dramatic lesson, just a few small ones learned in a quiet room of my own. The first is this: there is a profound difference between being needed and being wanted. For a while I confused the two. I thought being useful, cooking, cleaning would make me wanted, but it just made me needed, like a dishwasher or a vacuum cleaner. Being wanted is about presence, not performance. It's about who you are, not what you do. Now when Ben visits, he doesn't come because he has to check on me. He comes because he wants to see me. That difference is everything. The second lesson is about voice. I spent so long being quiet, trying to take up less space. I thought my needs, my feelings were an imposition, but every person has a right to their own space in the world, to their own voice. Even an old voice that talks about roses and memories. Finding my voice again meant finding a home. This flat gave me walls, but speaking my truth gave me the key. And the last lesson, perhaps the gentlest one, is about forgiveness. Not a grand, sweeping forgiveness, but a quiet one. I don't blame Sarah anymore, I understand her. She wanted her home, her marriage, her life. She saw a problem and wanted to fix it. Her method was harsh and her words were cruel, but the feeling behind them was human. I forgive Ben for not seeing my pain sooner. He was trying to keep everyone he loved in one boat, not realizing the boat was sinking under the weight of our silence. And most importantly, I forgive myself. For my pride, for my silence, for believing for even a second that my worth could be diminished to a single, harsh word. My story isn't about a wicked daughter-in-law or a neglectful son. It's about what happens to good people when they don't talk about the hard things. It's about the families we dream of, and the families we actually have, and the courage it takes to bridge the gap between the two. The other day, Ben was over for lunch. We were washing up together, him drying the plate I handed him. He said, "You seem lighter, Mum." I handed him a glass. "I am," I said. "I'm carrying my own bags now, and they're just the right weight." He smiled, that full, easy smile I remember from his boyhood. "I'm glad," he said, and I knew he meant it. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this: have the hard conversation. Say the thing that feels too scary to say. If you feel like a guest in your own life, speak up. If you love someone but feel weighed down by them, find a kinder way to help them stand on their own. Love doesn't mean sharing a roof. It can mean helping someone build a new one right next door. And if you ever hear a harsh word meant for you like burden, remember this: you are a person, with a history, with love to give, with a right to peace. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a story still being written. My chapter in my son's house is closed, but my book, it's still open. And the pages, for the first time in a long time, feel fresh and new. The light is almost gone now. My tree is just a silhouette against a twilight sky. The sparrows have gone to sleep. I'll make one more cup of tea with my blue kettle in my quiet, small, perfectly mine home, and I will be at peace. Thank you for listening to my story.